Welcome to the political upset that shook the nation, or at least mildly startled a tiny part of Essex, because in a move quite literally no one saw coming nor predicted, the diva of Westminster, the Brexit Bobby himself, Nigel Farage, has somehow managed to pull off an upset against the true titan of the establishment, the political giant and heavyweight of British politics, the legendary and immense Count Binface, leader of the recyclers from the home planet of Sigma 9. As Farage would say, Sigma Sigma on the wall, who's the skibbidiest of them all. But I want that to sink in for you. Count Binface, a politician campaigning with a bin lid on his head, was defeated by Nigel Farage in a race for a seat in Parliament, proving supposedly you cannot barrage the Farage. And I will give credit where it is due, he has won his second election for Parliament, something he has failed to achieve on 8 separate occasions from 1994 to 2024, making Clacton his ninth attempt at becoming an MP, and he won in 2024 and has now defended in 2026, making it 2 wins out of 10. Now, obviously, if my tone has not made it apparent already, I am sure you can figure out my opinion and exact estimation of Farage as a politician. Although, as it goes for the plethora of various silver-tongued snake oil salesmen that have roamed the halls of Westminster since time immemorial, Farage is up there with the very best. To use a sports analogy, he would be the Michael Jordan of such snake oil salesmen, a true master of his chosen craft. But let us be honest with ourselves for a moment about what this election actually represents, and ultimately it is Farage deflecting or shielding himself from the larger issues that loom over him, quite like the ancient sword of Damocles. The charges being mainly of the murky origins of his private donations he received, and rather than face parliamentary scrutiny, Farage acted more stupidly. He called a by-election, perhaps to take attention away, to save face, to bounce back in the media, or maybe to have another candidate beat him so he could deflect by claiming the establishment was out to get him. Why he called a by-election before a verdict was given during parliamentary scrutiny is a real baffling question here. What happened instead is that the parties he claimed so fervently to be the establishment, including the Greens, left him to fend for himself. And who was he left to fight? Well, it was a rose gallery consisting of Count Binface, Howling Lord Hope, Nick the Amazing Flying Brick, Baron von Thunderclap, Walter Kazi, Joseph 77, and Mad Mike Young. Those are but a few of the 34 candidates. Interestingly, amidst all the chaos, Farage still managed to pull a further increase of his majority by around 1,000 votes, albeit with a reduced turnout of around 44%, thereby giving him about 66% of the vote. And this is most likely due to the absence of all of the serious parliamentary contenders. However, it is still funny and amusing, not to mention humorously absurd. Though the binman himself, Count Binface, accrued a decent minority of around 9,455 votes. Farage himself even commented on the lack of opposition, essentially admitting that this was not a resounding victory. And indeed it was not, because everyone and anyone can see through the facade. Suffice it to say, this stunt has backfired on him spectacularly, as Farage has spent his summer defending against this hot mess of an election, and he still faces scrutiny when he returns to Westminster about the money he received as an MP, and all the while with egg on his face, or dare I say, milkshake. Now, the fact that he labelled Count Binface as the establishment candidate is quite laughably absurd in itself, as Binface will be the first to tell you that he is a recycler from Sigma 9, and was only labelled as an establishment candidate because no serious parties stood against Farage, opting not to participate in his little popularity contest. So for Binface to be lambasted in this way, and for Farage to declare victory against him as a win against the establishment, is certainly a foolhardy claim to make on the part of Farage. Because if anyone is part of the establishment, it is Nigel Farage, a man who was privately educated, made his money as an investment banker prior to politics, and has also held side jobs in lobbying whilst working as an MP. He worked as an bullion ambassador for over £22,000 an hour, lost over £560,000 in a cryptocurrency investment in a company whose largest shareholder also owned the gold bullion company that paid him for promotional work he did. And yet he has the gall to stand before his supporters and proclaim himself, quite proudly might I add, a man of the people, a champion of the common working man. The fantasy he has used since his days in the UKIP to imagine the Prime Minister as he local lad down the pub. A glaring contradiction considering he was privately educated, made his money prior to politics off of commodity trading, and was a politician, earned money from external sources, was also earning a salary as a representative of the general public through his capacity as a Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea. Not to mention the fact that he uses the same tired neoliberal policies of Margaret Thatcher that have haunted this nation for 50 years like a residual spectral phantom. He has also spent his entire career embedded with the very circles of wealth and power that stand leagues above those of his supporters, that he may distance himself away from to make himself more relatable. But that doesn't change the fact that he has wined and dined with billionaires, shook hands with bankers, took donations from the wealthiest individuals in the country, People like Aaron Banks, Richard Tice, Jeremy Hosking, Christopher Harborn, John Longworth, Andy Wigmore, not to mention Zia Yusuf. An irony and contradiction so glaring they'd be laughable if they were not so depressingly apparent and effective. And this is where I suppose the true irony of Farage's whole position is well and truly revealed on display. As here is a man who built his entire career on being an outsider to Westminster, somehow closer to the working classes than the suits around the country. Despite similarly being privately educated, he's presented himself as a rebel, a voice for the voiceless, though I would call him a rebel without a clue. But I would say he has now become exactly that which he despises. He is no longer this outsider. He has a massive platform on GB News. Korea Tories are defecting to reform in bucket loads to save their singing political futures. And still he acts as though he is some brave anti-establishment crusader. It takes a certain level of genius, and I almost want to commend him for it. I do admire how he has managed to leverage and position himself as both an insider and an outsider at the same time, because he benefits from all the perks of having power while simultaneously claiming to fight against it and be oppressed by it all at the same time. And his supporters accept this without question. For a lot of them, Farage can speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil, ultimately doing no evil. They decry Binface as the establishment despite him being a more violent critique of our political system. If Farage could ever hope to be in his dreams, they present a worldview that is intransigent, unchanging even when faced with facts and evidence to support the contrary. But that is what I suppose is the nature of the beast. Farage succeeds because he gives people permission to feel angry and validates their very real legitimate grievances against a government that has long since ignored them. And in return he receives a blank check, their undying loyalty, their votes, and their surrender. Their style of politics that prioritizes and prefers grandiose performances over actual political substance. But the real story here is not with the constituency of Clacton, nor the politician of Farage. It is actually what is happening with the restored Britain who have been cannibalising the reform vote nationwide. If Farage wants to avoid splitting the right to vote in an upcoming general election, he will need to compromise with Rupert Lowe, the leader of restored Britain. But that requires both men to not only set aside their massive egos, but also their acrimonious past together. And if there is one thing we know about Farage, is that his ego has never been his greatest ally. Because ultimately, Farage may find that his biggest enemy is not the establishment, but the man in the mirror. This will certainly be an interesting thing to watch as it unfolds. So I do hope that you enjoyed listening to this video about a recent event in British politics. We did learn that on Friday, Farage was to remain the Member of Parliament for Clacton-on-Sea, and I suppose now we await the full details of Farage's hearing in Westminster on the matter of his financial dealings. And one can only hope that Parliament scrutinises him as much as possible to ensure our democracy still functions in a fair and accurate manner, free from corruption. And again, if you have suggestions or want to leave your thoughts, I hope to see them down below in the comment section. Do make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon.